What's up, Dragon Brood? We are now officially about a week away from the early access event and then the release of Strixhaven. So, you know what that means? It is brew season for all of us that like coming up with a bunch of different decks. And lucky for you, you're on the right channel because I like coming up with decks. There's going to be new decks for you. So, we're going to be trying to put out new decks every day leading up to the set. And if you're lucky, you're going to be 2 or 3 a day. Just kind of as I get them done, I'll be putting them up and then sharing them with everybody, and we'll talk about their various strategies. Now, one thing I will say is that the new cards obviously aren't in Arena yet, so the layout's going to be a bit different on how we talk about them. But don't worry, I'm going to link all the deck lists below in the description, so that way you can still get the deck list when the set releases and you're able to upload them to Arena. So you can just mark this video, like it, subscribe, all the good stuff, and then you can come back to the video once the set releases, you can get the deck list. But today, we're going to talk about, I almost said Golgari, but we're going to officially call it a Witherbloom deck today that's focused on life draining the opponent. So you're going to be gaining life while your opponent loses life, and we're going to have a few different ways to go about doing that. There was already some cards that existed that were very good for this strategy, but we got some other bonuses from Strixhaven, and the cool part is this one actually got worked on with kind of the whole combination of my community on my stream on Twitch on Tuesday night. So this is kind of a group effort that you're getting submitted here, but let's go take a look at it. All right, now one of the things I really like about this particular list is that it does get to focus on a lot of new cards. So I'm really happy about that. We're going to get to experiment with them and just see how they work and how they focus. And then maybe here at the end, we'll talk about some cards that didn't make the cut that we considered. Now, starting from the top, we are playing one of the few one drops we could find that really made sense in this kind of list. You're talking about 3 Valentin, Dean of the Vein, which again, this comes back to Strixhaven being a little weird that you have a vampire that's your instructor and you call him the Dean of the Vein. Like, that's a little on the nose, right? I don't know who's taking it unless maybe they're the dean of some, like, I don't know, science class or something, talking about dead bodies. But anyway, that's beside the point. Here, this is one of the few one drop things we could find that we wanted to play. And being Menace and Lifelink is great for 1 mana, so I don't hate that at all. But it also has the ability that when your opponent has creatures go to their graveyard, or when they would die, they're exiled instead. And this doesn't seem huge, but when you're talking about maybe even something like Rakdos that has Woe Strider or Croxas, things like that, like once they die, they go away. You don't have to worry about them again. So that's actually pretty big. And then anytime your opponent would have something die, or a non-token creature die, you can pay 2 colorless, and then you get a 1/1 creature of your own. So this is actually doing a lot, right? It can get us life gain from just lifelink. It can be hard to block. It keeps creatures from going to your opponent's graveyard. You can get creatures of your own, or like this thing is checking a lot of boxes. So a big fan. But I will say it does also, whoop, not that one, this one does also have an important card on the backside as well. Since we're going to have a lot of things that let us gain life, Lisette, Dean of the Root actually is a 4 mana 4/4 that lets you pay an additional 1 every time you gain life, and then you can put a +1/+1 counter on all your creatures. So we have several ways that we can gain life, so just having to pay an extra 1, something to do with our mana, which is great, and then get to pump our team, which is huge. So really big fan of this card and how it works out in here. So glad we were able to find that one. Dina Soul Steeper. I was about to say Soup Steeper. I don't know why I had to stop myself there. But Soul Steeper, this is actually an interesting card, right? Because it's a 2 mana 1/3, which is fine, not great. This is a mid-rangey deck, not so much of an aggro deck. So we're not worried about not being able to attack big. 1/3 lets us block quite a lot, so we're okay with that. And whenever you gain life, you get to cost your opponent a life, really. So we're kind of ignoring the second ability. Like you can sack another creature, and then Dina's power becomes +X+0 equal to the sacrifice creature's power. We don't have a ton of things with a lot of power, so there will be a few instances where we use it, but not many. She's mostly in here for the first ability here. And then we are playing Witherbloom Command, 3 copies. And this card is just pretty flexible, but really we're going to be playing it for the deal 2 to your opponent, gain 2 life. That's more often what we'll be choosing, but sometimes you're going to get to kill something small your opponent has. Maybe you respond to them playing like a Luminarch Aspirant or something and kill that. nothing wrong with that. Get to pick off some early creatures. It can also actually says non-creature, non-land. So sorry, you actually can't even kill that. So gotta be real careful. There's a lot of cards in this set or this deck that let us kill various things. So there you go. I already misread it. So you got to be careful. But the -3, -1 will be getting used a lot on this particular card as well. So lots of good stuff you will be able to do with this. It does count as a spell. We have one or two things with Magecraft, so that'll matter too. But just saying, it's in here. We're seeing how it works. Don't know, but most of the time, I think you're going to be playing the drain your opponent for 2 option. Now, we are playing Shovel, Bane of Monsters, 1/3, Death Touch. I do like this card for 2 reasons. One, we do have a fair amount of kill spells. So killing something and getting to gain 3 and draw a card is nice. And the gain 3 is actually going to come to effect with many cards that we have. The other thing I like about it is the death touch is very big. A lot of times that'll just keep your opponent from outright attacking and buy you the time you need to get to your other cards in this list. And then this is one of the old cards that we kind of built around forever ago and then never really came back to it. So I'm really glad that we're getting a chance to play with Bastion of Remembrance. Like, it's going to come into play, it's going to make you a 1/1, and then from then on, every time you have a creature die, you gain a life, your opponent loses a life. So again, you can already see how like this combined with Valentine making more blockers, and then Dina gaining or costing your opponent a life whenever you gain a life. Then Shovel being able to gain life. Like, all of this is kind of like starting to snowball together a little bit. And it's kind of like the whole deck really that we came up with. So we're playing 2 Marauding Blight Priest. And this card is, again, whenever you gain life, each opponent loses life. That simple. Now, it is only a 3/2 for 3, so that's not great, but it's the reason we're only playing a couple of them. But the ability gives us a lot of upside. Then we're playing 3 copies of Ayara. Ayara 2/3. Whenever you have a Ayara or a black creature come into play, you get to drain your opponent for 1, and you can sacrifice a black creature to draw a card. Well, since we're gonna have things making pests, this seems pretty cool, right? Pests come into play, you get to drain your opponent for 1, Ayara can sack the pest, then you get a card. Like, just kind of keeps the cycle going. She does a lot in this deck, and since all of our creatures are black in some way, pretty much every creature is gonna get to drain our opponent. But then remember, whenever we're playing something like Dina, then it's like, oh, well, every time we do that, well, we're actually gaining 1 and the opponent's losing 2. So now it becomes an even more compounded ability every time. Then Veto. So again, now you're starting to see all this comes together, right? Now it's like, okay, let's say we do have a pest come into play. Well, Ayara is going to lose 1, gain, or your opponent's going to lose 1, you gain 1. Then Vito's going to say, sure, your opponent loses another one. And then Dina's going to say, yeah, your opponent loses another one, right? So this is like kind of just steamrolls. And that's if, then if something dies to the Bastion, you get that whole thing as well. So it kind of gets to a point where every time you get to gain life or something of that nature, maybe you have a creature die, whatever, your opponent's going to be possibly losing 2, 3, 4 life every card. Like, this is kind of a full synergy deck if you want to look at it that way. But 3 Veto, 3 mana, 1/3. Then whenever you gain that much life, your opponent loses that much life, and then you give all your creatures lifelink. So that's always a bonus. And then we're playing 3 Pest Summoning. This is a card that some people, even on the stream, looked at and said, like, this card's kind of weak or whatever. It's like, yes, it is. Not a great card. But here, it's making 2 1/1s that are blockers that are going to gain life, right? So we have so many cards that trigger off of you gaining life. We also have stuff that triggers off your creatures dying. So they're going to be doing a lot of work here. And don't forget, the damage they are preventing from whenever they block, plus gaining you life whenever they die, is a really big thing here. So got a lot going on, really, with this particular card. And then another new one that I was really excited to put into a list here was Sedgemoor Witch. Is a 3 mana 3/2, which again, just like we talked about the Blight Priest, 3/2 is not great for 3 mana. But in this case, you are getting Ward, where your opponent has to pay 3 if they wish to kill the card. Or pay 3 life, actually. And that's a big deal. When you're already trying to drain your opponent and do a bunch of chip damage, 3 damage just straight up to be able to kill this card is not going to be a joke. I mean, that's going to be real damage to your opponent. And this card also has Menace. So it's going to be pretty hard to block. It can put your opponent in some situations where they may not want to attack with an extra creature or so, knowing they need to be able to block this because they're just going to lose 3 if they try to target and kill it. But there's even more words on it that it has Magecraft. So every time we play one of our spells, we're also going to get a 1/1 pest. So again, this feeds into making the creatures that can die and drain your opponent or gain life and do a thing, right? Just kind of all the way down the line, all these cards are interacting with each other beautifully. So big fan of that. Then we're also playing 2 Agadeem's Awakenings just because it's versatile. It's a way to get those cards back, so I don't hate it at all. We have variable cost up through 5, so good there. And then Mortality Spear. This card, I do believe, is possibly one of the best new cards in the set. And I'd love to be wrong on this one, but I think it's going to be pretty playable, even in older formats. But the thing is, it's a 4 mana card that basically does the same thing that Binding on the Old Gods does, destroy target non-land permanent, but it's an instant instead of being an enchantment. I will also say this, though, because we have so many ways to gain life in the deck, very often we're going to be able to play this for 2, especially after combat situations where maybe we blocked, we lost a pest, gained 1 life. Okay, cool. Now we can go ahead and kill something for 2 mana. So really looking forward to playing with this card. It looks very good, and I'm super glad we're getting the opportunity to play with it early here. Then we're playing 1 Baleful Mastery, partly because I just want to try it, see if it's any good. But I do also want to have an additional removal card in here, and I figured might as well play the most efficient one, and that makes tons of sense here. Giving your opponent a card is not great, but being able to exile something is big. So maybe we end up playing more of those in the list just because of the exile perspective. And then we have 2 Gray Merchant of Asphodel. And again, this comes back to all of our creatures having some amount of black mana. Most of them are mono black, but we have a few that are black green. But being able to drain, even if it's just for 4 or 5, sometimes is going to be really big with this card late in the game, especially if we've done all the chip damage along the way. Because again, you're talking about Valentine having Menace being hard to block. You've got Dina doing a drain. The Witherbloom command being able to drain for 2. You've got drains coming from the Bastion of Remembrance, Marauding Blight Priest, Ayara, Veto, just all the way down the line. So much damage. And this is where I'm saying it's not going to be a fast deck, but there are going to be times that, all right, if you can survive a couple of those early turns with some spot removal or whatever, you're really going to be able to set up times where you're going to be like 2, 3 creatures in a row where now your opponent goes, okay, well now if I attack and you block with one of these pests or you gain some life, every time you chump block, I'm going to be losing 3 or 4 life. Like, is this even worth it? Lands, we're taking it kind of easy. Now, don't forget, there's actually 23 lands in here because we do have 2 Agadeem's Awakening. But we're playing 2 Castle Locthwain just as a way to draw extra cards. If things go right and we are able to gain some life, losing 1 or 2 to these castles are not going to kill you. We're playing a full set of Dark Boar Pathways. We're playing 4 Jungle Hollows. And I want to say this, normally I am not a fan of the lands that come into play and gain life. However, when you're playing a deck where gaining life is part of the core strategy, these are great. I mean, we're thinking about, okay, cool. Like, imagine you can put one of these into play tapped and then use your other spell that gets a reduced cost for gaining life for 2 mana, right? Like, this is awesome. And this may not even be just 1 life. There's a chance you put this into play, you could be draining your opponent for 3 or 4. Who knows, right? Between Veto and Dina and the Blight Priest, like, who knows? It could be real damage. So trying them out in here, I think they're going to work out for us. They're going to play a full set of the Necro Blossom Snarl. Just another way to get green and black mana. It does come into play tapped if you don't reveal either a forest or a swamp. We are playing 6 swamps, so we'll see how that works out. And then we have 1 Witherbloom Campus, mostly because it makes sense and it scries, so we're going to go for it. Now, this does give us a fair amount of lands that could come into play tapped, so we have to be aware of that, but we are playing 23, so we should be mostly okay. I say mostly crossing our fingers, but we could be mostly okay. But overall, I think this deck's actually pretty sweet, and I'm really looking forward to playing with it. Alright, now there were some cards like Witherbloom Apprentice that we really wanted to play, but ultimately what it came down to is sometimes Witherbloom Apprentice is just going to be kind of a bad grizzly bear, right? You'll pay 2 different color mana to get a 2/2 that sometimes won't do anything. I mean, it's only going to do something when you cast a spell. We kind of wanted something every time something happened to be able to do what it needed to do. So the slot where originally had that is where Shovel ended up sitting, because worst case scenario, Shovel actually has the ability to keep your opponent from attacking, or at least scaring them off from attack. But the upside is you're also going to be able to get cards, get life, and that's going to be doing a little bit more than what the Apprentice was going to be doing for us. And since we're not so worried about being a heavy aggro deck and we're willing to just play the long game, or at least to the mid game, we're okay with the creature just being 1/3 instead of a 2/2. Lots of neat cards we wanted to include, but I did include a sideboard with this as well. So on day 1, if you decide to play it in best of 3, you'll have a little bit of action there to work with. But overall, I think this is going to be a really fun deck, and I think it's a type of ability a lot of people like to play with. So hope so, but y'all let me know down in the comments. I have no idea. Also, let me know what other type of decks you want to see, or maybe what you're struggling with. And if you want to talk about now let me say this, don't post full deck lists in the comments. I actually make it a point not to look at full deck lists because I don't want the chat to become that. And plus, it's not a good way to discuss decks anyway. That's not what YouTube comments are built for. However, if you would like to share full deck lists and possibly get them featured, or at least get help with them, hop over to our Discord. I have the link in the description as well. And we do tons of deck help and people sharing ideas every single day. We have over 350 people in there now. So come by, say hi. Also, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because that lets you know every time I have a video up and lets me know that you appreciate what I'm doing, especially right now where we're going to be putting out deck lists constantly. You don't want to miss one. There might be something for you that you want to build, or maybe even just give you some ideas. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.